ますが、現代人というものはもうドラマティックな詩ができなくなってしまった。英雄的な詩というものもない時代に我々生きております。それにつけて思い出しますのは18世紀頃に書かれた「葉隠れ」という本で、武士道とは死ぬことと見つけたりというんで有名になった本ですが。
Salvete, legionaries. I'm out here with my shirt off, schizo maxing after hitting a good push day at the gym. I'm not as big as I once was. As I was transitioning out of the military, I was super busy. So it's kind of just working out at home, doing at-home workouts. I've only been back at the gym consistently for the past 2 weeks. So slow and steady gains, getting back on that grind. But I just wanted to talk about the warrior ethos and what that sort of entails. I'm going to be busy this week. I'm going back to California to move my things, all my personal belongings. So I don't really have the time to do a full podcast this week, but I want to keep this momentum, keep a video coming out every week. So I figured I'd schizomax and talk with you all. We're talking about the warrior ethos and what that means, and differentiating, of course, the warrior from the soldier. It's a very different thing. This is something that Evola talks about at length when he describes the concept of holy war. This is something I have talked about before in my video Life is War, where I talked about both Evola and Jünger's views on warfare and the sort of situation we exist in today where most war is fought for purely material gain. Jünger calls it the liberal war, and he defines war based on how the liberal seeks to expand his will to power, using what Evola would call a war for material gain. And of course, to do this, because the liberal does not actually fight in the ranks of the military, they must convince the peons, the lower classes, to fight for abstract concepts of freedom, fighting for freedom, right? That's the American way. Might as well say we're fighting for oil now, but yeah, and I think it's interesting because just 3 days ago was the anniversary of my friend Kareem Nakui's death during the Kabul airport bombing when we were pulling out of Afghanistan on August 26th of 2021. And another, I would call him a friend of mine, wasn't as close to him as Kareem, but Riley McCollum also passed away that day. And I went to boot camp with both of these young men. Both of them were also MMA fighters like me. Riley was more of a wrestler. Kareem was more of a jiu-jitsu guy. But what did they die for, right? A lot of people have been saying this to me. I made a post in remembrance to them on X, and a lot of people said, well, they died for nothing. And my response was, yeah, in a lot of ways, the death of the soldier today is in vain because of the whole conception of liberal war, fighting for purely material gains, and not just purely material gains, but material gains that don't really make our country stronger. They line the pockets of the military-industrial complex and these politicians who are often lobbyists, essentially bought off by the military-industrial complex. See, the military-industrial complex does not need to win wars to make money. In fact, it's the opposite. The longer a war goes on, the more munitions the military-industrial complex can sell to our military, the more vehicles they can sell, the more money they can make. So long wars like Iraq, like Afghanistan, these prolonged wars are better to make money for the military-industrial complex. And people say, well, what did Kareem and Riley really die for? And my response is, it is their willingness to sacrifice that I am honoring. It is their willingness to sacrifice, because once we do have the conception of holy war revived, right? Once we have that again, once we have the warrior again, instead of the soldier, then these sacrifices will be needed and will be required. And then we will be able to say, well, they died for a good reason. But what is the warrior ethos? I think the warrior ethos, most of all, is making an art of war. It's not treating it like just a job. See, when people had trades, yes, it was their job, but it was also their life work. See, still in Japan today, there is this idea that no matter what your craft is, you want to be the best at it. You want to perfect it. It isn't just making money that motivates you. to get up and do this job. It's your reputation. Your reputation is incredibly important. Saving face. This is incredibly important in Asian culture. And of course, the Japanese are a martial culture. And saving face is a very important aspect of their military culture as well as their warrior ethos. If you were to be defeated in battle, a lot of times samurai lords, daimyos, were expected to commit seppuku. Instead of surrendering, they were expected to literally slit their bellies open and have their heads cut off by a second, rather than accept defeat. So when it comes to trades for a Japanese person, it's an artistry. Even something as simple as making ramen. There's this guy, he makes vending machine ramen noodles, something that people in America wouldn't spend a second thinking about. And he gets up every single day. This guy's like 80, 90 years old. He gets up every day and he makes them fresh and puts them in the vending machine. He wants to make the best ramen noodles, even though they're in a vending machine, the best to-go ramen noodles. And he does this because of his reputation. He makes an art of his trade, and this is what differentiates the warrior from the soldier. The warrior makes an art of war, an art of combat, whereas the soldier, it is purely a profession. And the reason I bring this up is because you say to yourself, well, how do I incorporate a warrior ethos into my life? It's very difficult today. As a guy like Yukio Mishima would say, in the modern age, there is no possibility for a heroic death. And this is largely true. This is largely true even for myself. Part of the reason I joined the Marine Corps was because I thought there would be chances of heroic death. And then you ask yourself, well, did Riley and Kareem die heroically? And of course, some people would say that they didn't die heroically. And some people would say they did. But for me, when I finished my MOS school training, literally the day that Riley and Kareem died was the day I graduated from my first MOS school. And then I had another 3 to 4 months of training after that before I could even be in a position where I could be deployed. So for me, there was no chance of a heroic death, really. And in the modern age, when we're so detached from death, we're so detached from what it takes to survive, we take everything for granted. We take the food we eat for granted. We take the security. We take the pillow and the blankets that we have at night. We take all that for granted. And what happens is you begin to become detached from the elemental relationship that millions of years of human evolution became attuned to. See, our ancestors, even thousands of years ago, walked with death on a daily basis. They walked with death, especially 9,000 years ago, before the domestication of animals, before the agricultural revolution. Hunter-gatherers literally walked alongside death every single day. Walking with death is also the way of the warrior. It's walking alongside pain. See, we relish in pain in modernity because this is the closest we can get to walking alongside death. The closest we can get is lifting steel, lifting heavy weights, and creating micro tears in our muscles. The closest we can get is sparring and feeling our faces struck or our shins battered. That's the closest we get to death. The closest we get to death is tapping out, seconds away from passing out from rear naked choke, getting the carotid artery closed and literally feeling your whole brain go black, which is almost a peaceful feeling in some ways. But this is the closest we get to death, and Mishima talks about this as well in Sun and Steel. He talks about how you're sort of simulating death. You're simulating death through pain, through this dance, which is sparring. For him, he did kendo, which is Japanese swordsmanship. He also did karate, and he did boxing. That was the closest you could get, and a lot of times it's the closest you can get today. I've always said, I see more similarities to the warrior ethos in a martial arts gym than I did in the military. Because for the military, it's all a job. Most of the people there, it's a job. So it's an interesting dichotomy, or maybe not dichotomy the right word, but it's an interesting distinction, rather. And to cultivate the warrior ethos in modernity, I think martial arts is integral. More than that, seeking pain where pain is not readily in your life is necessary. Seeking things that make you uncomfortable, of course. And this is sort of a broken record. But it's nevertheless true. But I also think in being an artist and in treating war as an art, you must also treat life as an art. And this means avoiding the ascetic way of life. See, to be an ascetic is to deny the pleasures of life. If you think of your ultimate or your ultra monk mode or your ultra stoic mode, somebody who says, oh, I'm never going to party, I'm never going to drink, I'm never going to have sex, I'm never going to enjoy myself, this is also wrong. See, the whole aspect of Nietzschean life affirmation is affirming life in its totality. That means raising life experience in all ways, raising the amount of pain and suffering you go through, but also the ecstatic joy and pleasure. That is what Nietzschean life affirmation is about. And I think that's the same with the way of the warrior. Is the true way of the warrior is ultimately a heightening of all emotions, of all feelings, which includes pleasure alongside pain. And I think this is why men like D'Annunzio are so profound. D'Annunzio, in a lot of ways, is described as a decadent. He lived a very aristocratic lifestyle. He had many affairs. He lived very wealthily. But he also put himself in many positions of great danger. I believe he did flying missions in World War I. He joined elite commando units and fought against the Austrians, I believe. He marched on the Fiume and formed his own state, even at one point almost going to war with the Italian government. In fact, marching on the Fiume is what inspired Mussolini to march on Rome. He sought danger, and he sought pain, and he sought suffering, and he sought literal war, but also sought ecstatic pleasure, ecstatic joy. This is why D'Annunzio, I think, is incredibly Nietzschean figure. And of course, D'Annunzio had to have come across Nietzsche's works, and I believe he had. I'll have to look more into that. Which goes into another point I have regarding the warrior ethos, and something I think guys like Evola get wrong. See, Evola, being the ultimate reactionary thinker, believes in the dogma of the past, the dogma of traditionalism as a form which must be replicated time and time again, whereas a thinker like Nietzsche believes in entropy. He believes in a constant becoming, a constant evolution. See, the whole aspect of the Übermensch, he says, ape is to man what man will be to the Übermensch. Man is a bridge. Man is a bridge to the Übermensch, to the next evolution, to a potential final form way, way off in the future. Nietzschean philosophy and futurism is about constant entropy, constant movement upwards, whereas thinkers like Evola, and of course, he's incredibly valuable, and I love reading his works, but where I disagree with him is the idea that traditionalism should be a dogma, that the transcendent element is preeminent. I believe these things evolve over time. Entropy, we move forward towards greater heights and greater forms. They live only as potential. They don't live as something preeminent. If there's anything preeminent, it is the potential. And if you want to argue that preeminence as potential is a sort of pre-existence, and then that is the transcendent element, then I could begin to agree. But to think it is something objective before our existence, that I don't agree with. But of course, all these things get into semantics and a lot of different random, slight disagreements here and there. But I still love Evola, obviously. But the reason I mention that is because I think the true warrior ethos has to be about futurism as opposed to traditionalism. It can't be reactionary. A big problem today, I think, especially amongst the right, is that too many people consider themselves conserving. Well, what are we conserving? I think that the true essence of the right has to be entropy. It has to be going forward. It has to be progressing towards greater forms. You can't see humans as these perfectly made beings. That's why the theory of evolution is so important. The idea that we evolved to get here also posits that we will evolve to something further. People don't realize primates today, like chimpanzees, we don't descend from chimpanzees. They're also a form of evolution, but we share common ancestors. And to believe in the theory of evolution is, like I said, to believe that you can also evolve to something more, to that Übermenschen figure. And that's incredibly important. See, I am in a state of entropy myself right now. If I just was happy with how I look now, what would be the point? I might as well kill myself. That's why Mishima kills himself at like 40. He says there's no chance for a glorious death after 35. So if you really believe that, then you might as well kick the bucket at your height if it only goes down from there. But I believe you can always go up. And I also disagree with Mishima, because Julius Caesar was 55 when he was at the height of his power. It's really never too late, though, of course, there are Alexanders who at 22 take the reins of Macedon and form empires. But it's a complicated thing. But if, like I said, just a little bit of schizo maxing, just a little bit of D'Annunzio decadence maxing, Mike Mentzer maxing. I'm going to be starting to read Mike Mentzer's philosophies because I want to get into bodybuilding. Of course, I'm going to get back into martial arts too, but I want to do a little bit of bodybuilding. I'm a little excited for that. So we're going to be Mike Mentzer maxing. Oh, there's a little cat there. I'm going to go try to see if I can pet it. I'm actually passing my apartment right now, but I'll make a loop back. We'll see if we can get this cat to let me pet it. If not, it's all good. I'll just go back to my room. But yeah, I hope despite the fact that this is a little bit just random, I'll still do a cool thumbnail, cool vaporwave futurist thumbnail. All right, this is a lost cause. That cat's too far. I can hardly see it anymore. So we're just gonna call it here. End the video by this cool street lamp right there. I gotta say, I love the East Coast humidity. It's quite nice. I'm enjoying it. But yeah, the warrior ethos ultimately has to be about becoming. You can never drop pack, right? In the Hagakure, they talk about seeking perfection your whole life long, knowing you'll never attain it. This is also something Musashi alludes to, right? That's how my channel started, with good old Miyamoto Musashi and the Dakido. I know everyone says, oh sorry, yeah, the Dakido. Everyone was like, no, it's not the Dakoto or whatever. So I apologize. But yeah, constant entropy, constant movement upwards. Sometimes you see that scary group of woods there. Sometimes you just got to walk into the woods, but not today because I don't have a shirt on and I'm going to get eaten alive by bugs. But yeah. Finishing up my esoteric schizo maxing. Got a good pump in. Going to get more pumps in. Doing a long road trip this weekend, so that'll be fun. But yeah, lots of good stuff planned. Keep up with New Rome Legionaries. If you want to join the Legion, just ask. That's all you got to do. Of course, shout out to our Patreon supporters. We got Rosendo Mayorga and we got Sean. Both people I'm very thankful to for supporting the channel and supporting the work I do. And yeah, there's one last thing I will say. It's to retain the warrior ethos, you must simulate the conditions of the past where our ancestors walked with death. And the only way to do that is to seek pain in your life, whether that be bodybuilding, whether that be through martial arts, whether that be through doing a Spartan race, whether that be through actually joining the military. Maybe even we'll get a taste of war. Perhaps our country will, with China soon. Who knows? But seek pain. Pain is a simulation of death. And you must simulate suffering which resembles death to be able to live the warrior ethos, to live the warrior way. And something let's all try to incorporate in our lives. But as always, this is the Warrior Philosopher, building the foundations of the warrior philosophy. We'll see you next time.